Yeah, I just don't get the whole vampire thing though, Barry. Like, do you drink blood? Yeah, like I bring this up because like, do you need blood? Do you even have any blood? I don't get it. And like also, do you turn into a bat at night? Some kind of like brick bat and fly around the neighborhood? Because like that leads to so many other questions. I just don't. Oh, sorry about that. We'll pick this up later. Hey everybody, how you doing? Teching and Barry back again here. He's a vampire. Just yeah, we're rolling with that, I guess. All right. Here is the story about how we find out there's a treasure in the Grand Line. There's no doubt. The pirate whose eye is on it, he'll sing, "I'll be king of the pirates." He's gonna be king. I want Luffy to sing a song about being king of the pirates. When he finally finds the treasure, I want Brook to take out a guitar and Luffy starts singing the song about how he's king of the pirates, because it was in the rap and therefore it is canon. All right. Anywho, so Egghead's wrapping up. I think pretty soon we're going to be, I mean, we already kind of are. Like in the last chapter, they made it to the evacuation site. The Great Eric, the ship of the giants, is pulling off away from Egghead. There's still a lot of issues to resolve. And, you know, the Thousand Sunny is still up in the Labo phase, and Zoro's still fighting against Ethan, and the other Gorosei are attacking. There's a lot of nonsense going on, but I think we're going to be resolving this within the next, you know, less than 10 chapters, I guess, maybe. We might be on our way to going into the next arc, okay? But, there's a couple of questions that are going to be brought up, and actually Dory brought one of them up just last chapter, chapter 1118. They managed to make it to the ship. Luffy's there, gorging himself in the kitchen, and then Dory and Bragi are, you know, like, all right, set sail, man, we're going to Elbaf, and everyone's like, yeah, and then Mars kind of showed up out of nowhere, and it's like, oh, shit, right, one of the Gorosei can actually fly, it's a giant bird, and Dory is like, oh, well, I guess he'll just chase us to the ends of the earth then. We should probably deal with that. But the problem is, how do you deal with it? Because they've been trying to deal with them, and it really doesn't work. Like, the giants are using their strongest attacks, like just melee damage, and that's not really putting them down, or really, you know, at best, you could stall them for like a few moments, and then they heal up, and they're just good as new. Luffy's been doing his Gear 5th stuff, and, you know, bouncing attacks back at them, and same kind of effect. You could maybe stall them for a few seconds, and then they heal up, and then that's it, right? Okay. So the big question right now, I would say, and I was trying to come up with an answer for, I do have one, I don't know if it's a good answer, but I have one, is, you know, even if they manage to get away from the Marine encirclement around Egghead and they're on their way to Elbaf, what is preventing the Gorosei from just chasing after them? I mean, Mars is the obvious one because he's the Itsumare, but, like, the other ones can definitely fly, or at least no Geppo. I mean, like, Venus Joro was able to jump up to the Labo phase, so they're probably able to just run on the air. But I could kind of imagine all the other ones with the ability to fly, or at least the ability to follow the ship, okay? Also, they have the teleportation power. So, like, even worse comes to worse, let's say the only person that can follow the Elbaf ship is Mars. He could always, like, fly to Elbaf and then use the summoning there, and then they could just all jump to Elbaf, and all the Gorosei are, like, waiting for them there. Now, obviously, you know, Elbaf is home to the giants, like a giant army, like a literal army of giants. Like, maybe the Gorosei are like, yeah, all right, we don't want to deal with that. There's a reason why Elbaf is probably its own thing. There are giants that work or are part of the government, like in the Marines and stuff, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Elbaf is allied with the world government. In fact, I would say that they probably are not. It's just that the giants don't, like, keep all of them inside of the island. Like, they're allowed to leave, they're allowed to go do their own thing. And Saul even said there are places in the world where giants live that is not Elbaf. Like, that's their ancestral homeland. Eventually, if you go back far enough in the family of trees, I guess, they all come from Elbaf family tree because of Yggdrasil. But, you know, they all branch off, and there's other regions in the world, but I don't think Elbaf is allied. So, you know, the Gorosei showing up at Elbaf and, like, you know, waiting for them. I mean, there's going to be other giants, you know, waiting for them and then attacking them, all right? So that might be too much. But just the idea that, like, Mars couldn't just constantly follow the Great Eric and just bombard it with firepower over and over and over again. Like, eventually the ship is going to burn and sink, you know? Especially if the Gorosei have, like, almost infinite stamina and can regenerate from, like, any attack. So why wouldn't that? That's a concern. How are we going to deal with that? So
at the end of the last chapter, we had Luffy and Bonnie going into their Gear 5th combination. So that's going to basically, that's going to deal some damage to them. But once again, Luffy in Gear 5th was not able to put down or seriously encumber or trap the Gorosei in any way that really mattered. So, yeah, there's 2 Gear 5ths now. There's 2 people with the power of the Sun God. That's cool. We're going to see some wacky Toon Force shenanigans in the next chapter, I am sure. But, like, let's say Mars fires a fire beam, and then Luffy and Bonnie, use their combined abilities to knock the beam right back at Mars, and it hits him right in the face, and it blows his head off. Well, from what we've seen, he's just going to regenerate and go right back to following them, right? Like, I really don't see any way, unless Luffy and Bonnie can, like, trap the Gorosei in some kind of container, or, like, some kind of, like, Toon Force ability, where they literally could not escape for not just a few seconds, not just a few minutes, but they were trapped in that cage for, like, days. I really don't see them getting to Elbaf without any incident, okay? Unless also, like, Shanks was there, unless, like, Shanks arrives and, like, well, I thought you might need some extra help, Dory and Broggy. Now, if that were to go down, that wasn't the idea I had, but if that was to go down, I'm like, all right, they might have a fighting chance here, okay? But I just don't see it. I really don't want that to be the case either. I don't want, like, Luffy and Bonnie being so strong together that they're able to just knock down the Gorosei or trap them or maybe straight up wound them, like, severely. Like, they can't heal from that damage. That might be a bit too much. So then we also have the Iron Giant. Right, the Iron Giant is there. Obviously, that thing's going to play a role here because that was set up at the very beginning of the arc. So the Iron Giant is now being powered twice-fold by the Sun God energy coming off of Luffy and Bonnie. By the way, I was reading some theories about this, and this actually makes a lot of sense. It was mentioned that nobody had really awakened the Sun God fruit that Luffy has up until Luffy, and it was like Joy Boy back in the Void Century, and then some people had the power, but nobody awakened it until Luffy's. Well, how did the Iron Giant power up 200 years ago? I always assumed, like, oh, well, there might have been somebody that awakened it very briefly, and the government just didn't know about that person, right? And it powered up the Giant, and it rose to the top of Marie Geoise, and then it got knocked off and everything, right? What if it wasn't a user of the Hito Hito no Mi model Sun God? What if it was a previous user of Bonnie's Devil Fruit? What if it was a previous user of the Toshi Toshi no Mi 200 years ago that did the exact same thing Bonnie is doing now? Like, I want to imagine a future where I am the most free, and then the most free you could possibly be is being the god or the avatar of the god, or at least the powers of the god of the sun, of freedom, of hope, and it achieved the exact same form 200 years ago, and that's what powered up the Giant. So I've been seeing some theories about that, and I think that makes a lot of sense because it was confirmed by the Gorosei that no one had ever been able to awaken the powers of the Sun God fruit from Joy Boy all the way up until Luffy, right? So there's a little caveat to that, right? But anyway, so Iron Giant is going to be charged up and then awaken and, like, probably shoot up out of the ocean that it fell into, and the Iron Giant might hold back the Gorosei. But here's the thing, like, I'm sure the Iron Giant is really strong, like, but it is, over 800 years old. Even if it's powered up with the powers of the Sun God, like, it is kind of rusty, it is a little bit shambly and stuff like that. The idea that the Iron Giant could hold off all 5 of the Gorosei while the Straw Hats get away in the giant ship and the Sunny goes down and they're all sailing away for Elbaf. Like, the Iron Giant, like, dude, there's 5 of the Gorosei. And last chapter we had Top Man in his boar form just knock it into the water. Now, granted, that was when it wasn't really charged up because Luffy wasn't in Gear 5 at that point, and the Iron Giant was like, where did you go, Joy Boy? Boom! And then it gets hit by a boar and falls in the water. So now that it has double the energy signature to, like, go off of, maybe it's stronger this time that I can actually, like, grab on to Top Man's, like, tusks and, like, push it back or something like that, and it could resist Saturn's poison, and it can, like, block Mars's fire laser or something. Like, there's different ways it could fight, but I just don't see it holding off all 5 of them. It just doesn't make sense, right? At the very most, you could imagine, like, Saturn and Top Man deal with the Giant. Like, 2 of the Gorosei deal with the Giant. Mars could just fly over it, so maybe the Iron Giant can fly as well. It probably can. It has, like, a jetpack looking thing on its back, but, it's like, it's outnumbered. It's outnumbered, unless there's 4 more Iron Giants that show up out of the woodwork. They were under the water the whole time. Unless that happens, it's like, how the hell are they gonna, hold off all 5 of the Gorosei, right? So I'm running the numbers over this. I'm looking at this, and yeah, it might stall the Gorosei for a bit. It might block 2 or at most maybe 3 of them, but not all 5. alive. We have Ethan still up there fighting against Zoro, and we have Mars that can fly around. So the only way that I can see the Straw Hats managing to escape Egghead and getting to Elbaf without incident is if the Gorosei are recalled back to Marie Geoise. Because the only individual that can command the Gorosei, and they have to obey unequivocally, like there is no argument, like when Im gives an order, the Gorosei have to abide by said order. So if Im were to telepathically, which I'm assuming Im can telepathically communicate to the Gorosei just like they all can with each other, you know, Im is like, return now to the room of authority, return now to the castle. You know, the Gorosei have to abide by that. They have to be like, Im, our ruler, asks of us, we must return at once, right? And so they all return. Now, why would Im recall all of the Gorosei back to Pangea Castle? Well, I mean, one way would be like, y'all screwed up. Y'all messed up this time. Like, Im is like an upset parent, and, you know, all the Gorosei are there, and they're just like, I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry, Mom. You know, just like, he's like, I'm very disappointed in all of you, especially you, Saturn. Aw. I'm sorry. It's just like, your actions led to there being a second one. There was enough problems. There was one of them. There's two now. Did any of you also perform experimentations on a woman that turned out to be the mother of a person that could harness the powers of the sun god? Peter, I'm looking at you. No, I didn't. Just okay. Ethan, stop it. Stop laughing. Just because you're my favorite doesn't mean it's like that this is a whole new realm where the Gorosei are just a bunch of children and Im is just like the very upset parent. But no. I mean, that would be funny, but no. Hey, let me ask you a question, guys. Who's that guy in One Piece? He shows up every now and then. I don't know if you guys remember him. He leads like some kind of revolutionary army. I think he's Luffy's dad. He doesn't do much except look in one cardinal direction. But when he does do things, we'll find out. Yeah, so Dragon, he's leading a revolutionary army, right? Yeah. And there's open rebellions all over the world, right? Yeah. And Sabo is like, you know, held up as the Flame Emperor and everybody's kind of behind them. Like, you could argue that the Revolutionary Army, this is the most support they've gotten for their cause since Dragon started the Freedom Fighters, like almost 3 decades ago, right? Like, you could agree with that. And it's looking like the final phase of this plan anyway. Like, they already declared war on the Tenryubito, and they're stopping their food supplies and everything like that. So one could assume that to launch a attack on the main city where the Tenryubito live, which is the whole point of the revolution, is to dethrone the Tenryubito and establish a new ruling body, still have the structure of the world government, but get rid of the corrupt rulers. One would say if you're going to do that, right around now would be like a really good time to do that because you have the most support and everything's kind of going to shit anyway. Like, this is the time to do it. Also, you know, if the 5 rulers of the entire world are currently out of town and are all the way on the other side of the world on Egghead dealing with Luffy and everybody like that. Granted, they can teleport, but right now they're not in Marie Geoise. You'd assume this would be the time to strike. Now, we have seen the Revolutionary Army during Vegapunk's message. We saw Dragon and Ivankov and all of the commanders on Kamabaka listening to the message. They were mostly all surprised by that. Dragon kind of wasn't. Dragon was just kind of there with like the ellipses, just kind of like ... like, It's very likely, in fact, most probable that Vegapunk, or at least Shaka, told Dragon all the stuff that he knows. Like, all the stuff that Vegapunk is revealing in the message is stuff that Dragon was probably told maybe a few days or weeks before the events of Egghead occurred, because they did have communication with each other, right? But I'm just saying, like, the 5 Gorosei are out of town. The castle is, like, you know, they're also probably reeling from some damages caused during the reverie. Imi's the only one there right now. This is kind of, like, if you're going to attack, I'd say now is the best shot, right? You got, right? You have your force. Your force is ready to go. You got Dragon. You got Ivankov. You got all 4 of the commanders. Belobetti, Morley, Karasu, Lindbergh. You got the vice commanders that were just introduced with their names, and like Ahiru and everybody, and I think Giron was the other guy's name and stuff like that. You got the cow dude. You got the gambling guy that's like freaking Humpty Dumpty or whatever. You know what I mean? Like you got all of the commanders there. Sabo is there, right? Okay, you got pretty much everybody ready to go. Like, holy crap, go! Now, does Dragon know that the Gorosei are like there right now? They're at Egghead. You know, you could say that like, well, that information hasn't really been made public, but you could argue that Dragon might have other means of figuring out like, holy crap, the Gorosei are not in Marie Geoise, or they're at Egghead right now. Yeah, let's go attack. So if Dragon decided to mobilize his army and go now, and Eam was aware of this, that would maybe make sense for Eam to be like, hey, Gorosei, you need to come back here right now because Dragon's Revolution is happening. You need to be here. So that would make sense for them to retreat and go back, and then that would therefore allow Luffy and the Straw Hats and Bonnie and everybody on the Elbaf ship of the Great Eric, and as well as the Sunny if it lands on that, to get away. There is a marine blockade, but the marine blockade is like the least of their problems, to be honest with you. Getting away from that is fairly easy compared to dealing with 5 eldritch demons, okay? So I'd say then this is like a combination of all this stuff where Iron Giant comes out, deals with some of the Gorosei, Luffy and Bonnie use some combination attacks to like knock the Gorosei away for a little bit, maybe at most damaging them enough so they have to heal up, and it's like, all right, this is going to take a while to get back to full power, and then at that point, that is when it's like, oh wait, turns out the armies are mobilizing at Marie Geoise, we need to get out of here. And also Dragon, with his, like, unnamed Storm Devil Fruit, we still don't know what it's, a Logia, or if it's a Paramecia, or what, Mythical Zone, whatever it is. He can control the damn weather, all right? That's a pretty powerful ability, and it also would probably allow some more ease of travel. Like, maybe he can't take everybody with him. If he was actually a mythical zone, he could turn into, like, a giant, like, mythical dragon or some kind of figure from, you know, like, Mesoamerican mythology or something like that. You know, like, he turns into some, like Kukulkan or Quetzalcoatlus. And Quetzalcoatlus. There's one that's named after, like, a pterosaur back in the name, and then there's another one that's, like, the feathered serpent or whatever. I've seen theories about that. So, like, Dragon turns into that thing, and the commanders get on Dragon, and they all fly towards Marie Geoise. Or if it is just a Logia or a Paramecia, and he could just control the weather, I mean, that would be devastating, right? He could just summon up a giant typhoon, like, huge, you know, dark skies and thunder and lightning over Marie Geoise, and it's, like, beginning, and Eam knows what that means, and, like, son of a bitch, Dragon, I knew you were gonna make a move someday. All right, well, you guys need to get back here right now. And then they have to summon them, and then you have at the same time as Luffy and everybody are escaping Egghead and getting to Elbaf, you have, like, a revolution occurring. Because the revolution has to happen at some point, right? Like, I guess you could wait until the very end of the story for that to happen, but, like, dude, the beginnings of it need to happen now, you know? Like, something, like, soon, okay? Dragon, I'm really sorry, man, but it's time for you to finally do something. So there is that issue right there. I'm a little bit dubious just because of we didn't really see the Revolutionary Army mobilizing or doing anything. They were just calmly listening to the message at Kamabaka. But Kamabaka, I don't think is that far from the Red Line. It's in like the latter half of Paradise. I think they could go from Kamabaka to like the Red Port and then get up to Marie Geoise like fairly, you know, in terms of time, it might not take that long. And then, like I said, they might have a bunch of different Devil Fruit abilities. And Dragon has powers that we still don't know about, and that could be the thing that allows them to invade quickly. I mean, Dragon, if he wants to get rid of the Tenryubito system, he has to have thought of, like, how do we break into Marie Geoise and launch a full frontal attack? Because geography is everything, if you look at it, how do you get an army up to the top of the Red Line? The short answer is the government kind of set it up like you can't. The only way to get to the top of the Red Line through normal means is using the Bondolas at the Red Port. The Bondolas are not big enough to support, like, a giant army in order. That's kind of the whole point, right? Fisher Tiger was able to scale the walls and launch, Havoc. The Jerma are able to scale the walls and maybe do some stuff. But the plan that Dragon had to take over, Marie Geoise and like subdue the Tenryubito was probably never just like have an army march to the wall, because that's a horrible idea. It's probably not going to work unless you have some kind of Devil Fruit ability. You also have Morley's power. Morley has the ability of the push fruit that can also maybe help get an army up to the top there. But my point is, like, yeah, Morley might be able to use a power to like create a platform out of the red line and just shoot the platform all the way to the top. That's the kind of stuff you have to do, because otherwise, like, Lindbergh has a jetpack. Karasu can turn into, a soot, or, he can make the soot in the shape of birds, so maybe he can, like, people can jump on the back of Karasu, and, oh, here's a combination move for you. Karasu uses the power to turn into giant crows, and then you have all of the commanders and all the high-ranking officer, everybody in the Revolutionary Army that's worth a shit gets on the back of Karasu's birds, and then Dragon whips up a tailwind, and we all just fly straight up to the top of it. That might be the plan to invade, because there's really no way you're getting a massive army like marching into like an army of like 10,000 soldiers marching into Marie Geoise. It's not going to happen, okay? Unless you have the Jerma helping you out, right? Which is not really going to happen here, because the Jerma are off doing their own thing with the Neomads organization and all that kind of nonsense, right? But otherwise, like I said, the only way this could work is like if the Iron Giant turns out to be way stronger than we originally assumed, or Luffy and Bonnie together are able to do something to really push the Gorosei back. Because let's say they even, like, let's say full power. You have Dory and Broggy that use, like, their, like, Elbaf spear technique they used against the giant goldfish. And Luffy and Bonnie use a combination attack. And you have the Iron Giant use some giant laser beam. And then you also have the rest of the Straw Hats. Like, let's say they launch some devastatingly strong combination attack at all 5 of the Gorosei, and it hits all 5 of them at the same time, and it like almost like disintegrates their forms with how much power is being output with everybody doing something, right? Even maybe Kuma wakes back up and does something, whatever. They just decimate the Gorosei in one final attack, and they're like, okay, now we sail toward Elbaf. Do you know how long it's going to take to get to Elbaf? It's not that far from Egghead, but they're not going to get there in like an hour or two. It's going to take a while to get to Elbaf, right? I'd imagine it's a bit. So maybe a day of travel at least. It's going to take a while to get there. So some final attack that devastates the Gorosei, how long do you think it would take for them to reform and just follow after the Great Eric? A couple minutes? Like maybe maximum like 5-10 minutes for them to all coalesce and get back together. I don't even think it would take that long. And then, like, all right, they launched a really big attack. They're probably worn out, and we can just reform and go right after them. And they're not that far away. I'm just saying, if you have Mars up in the sky, just constantly just flying way up high in the sky, and no one can hit him, and he just keeps firing energy blasts till the end of time, eventually they're going to burn the ship down just by attrition and him not, losing any power. So unless there's some limitation placed on the Gorosei or something else I'm not looking at, in order for them to go away, it has to be Eam ordering them, and the only way I can see that happening is the revolution happening. So we'll see what happens there. Thanks for watching, everybody. Let me know down below what you think of these wacky ideas. Have a good night. Teching 101 signing out. All right, Barry. So what about running water? Are you like, can you cross running water? Vampires have a lot of weird weaknesses. I'm just trying to figure out exactly where this begins and ends with you. Okay, so